Hi, I'm Stephanie Rozzo. Welcome to Nature Sketch Create's Go Out and Sketch a White-lined Sphinx Moth instructional video. In this video, I'll be showing you how to paint the White-lined Sphinx Moth by applying what you learned in the step-by-step lesson. First, make sure you have all the materials you need before you go out to sketch. Today, I'm sketching from a video of a White-lined Sphinx Moth for demonstrative purposes. Remember, this is just a sketch. Take your time, relax, and observe. Hopefully you're out in nature, and don't get too caught up if you think you've made any mistakes. Let's get started. So you want to apply what you learned in your step-by-step lesson. And it's great to have the art as a reference to help you when you're sketching. Because when you're sketching from an animal, it might be moving and you might not know exactly where some lines might go. But if you have the image that you've already created or the reference image, you can see some of those things and help use it as a reference for location. So first, just go ahead and draw some very rough sketches so that you make sure that the image actually fits on your page. So use some very light marks. Again, oval for the overall body and head, and then kind of a triangle like shape for the wings. And this just is getting the size so that you don't get it too big. So this body would have been too big if I had started from there. I wouldn't have been able to fit the wings on. So then you can start to add some more detailed shapes to kind of define the space a little bit more. So I can start, these wings are about the same size. So I can start adding it in. And this animal is moving its wings. So kind of have to pay attention to what it looks like at a certain moment and do your best you can. And this is where you can refer to the sizing and shape of this in this image to kind of help you out. And you're just doing a sketch, so it's not going to be exact, so don't worry too much about that. You're just going to get this onto the page. And in the video you can see that the legs behind the wings, but I'm just going to do like we did with the step-by-step image and just draw on the leg. I'm just going to draw a line for it for now, just to indicate where it's at. And then I'm going to start on the body because I'm not exactly sure where this next wing will start. So I'm going to add some rough shapes for the body. And the defining part where the thorax is this part right here. And it's kind of an ovalish shape that kind of crescent comes down, and that'll help as kind of a landmark shape to help me know where I need to add everything in the sizing of the different parts. So where the wings are and where the thorax meets the abdomen and how big it will be. Again, just drawing in some real quick shapes and nothing real detailed. And if this animal was to fly away, you'd want to have most of these defining shapes in here, and then you can add in the details using what you know about the animal from the step-by-step. But it's best just to be out there and observing the animal and getting this out onto the page quickly and not worrying too much about accuracy. So that's why I start with these shapes first. And you can redefine it a little bit if needed. I didn't really like the size of that shape, and I probably leave erase these lines actually because they're a little dark and I might get confused. Just real quick. And I'm just, because I can, I'm looking at the shape of the wing again real quick, comparing it to this one in direction and defining that a little bit more. Oops. And that basically works. Now I'm going to add some of the defining marks. So the antenna, and some of the stripes. And I'm just adding them in real quickly because if I was out sketching in the field, this animal could be leaving any moment and I would have to rely on this sketch. So again, you get some landmark lines in, like this line across down here from the top to the bottom of the abdomen. And then kind of probably going to use this because the animal is moving to figure out how many sections there are in that abdomen. So I'm starting to add some details like sectioning this out. And I may make other adjustments as needed here real quick. And if that isn't exactly right, it's okay. It's just a sketch. And the location of those marks is probably not going to be exact. Maybe I added too many abdominal sections. That's okay too. If you have more time, the animal is not moving a lot, it's good to get those things right, but if it's moving a lot, you know. This is where you can kind of see that where the white and the black would be to help you while that animal's moving around to kind of add it in. Even how many abdominal parts. There's these little white spots, they don't have to be perfect. And then tan area underneath that we can see. And then most of this is lined a little bit dark. And then there's another line on the other side. And this is all seems a little bit big to me. So I'm gonna bring it in a little bit. And I'll erase that real quick. I don't really want to leave it in there. It's okay to erase a little bit. Just try to only erase lines that might be confusing for you. Try to leave the lines that don't really determine that. So like this line here is not going to confuse me, so I'm just leaving it there just for speed. So now that I have this part, I think there's these little details in there as well. And I'm gonna make that a little bit bigger. You may even have an animal that's in front of you, not moving like this one. You can spend lots of time observing its different parts. And then I'll add some quick stripes in the wings. And add the location of these stripes might not be exactly right. And that's okay. This is just a sketch. I'm just getting a representation of this animal. At this point, if this animal flew away, I could use this for the coloring in order to paint it in. And even some of the details I just put in, I could add these onto here. And there are details on the wing that I can discern a little bit better because I have it here to refer to. And I'm just going to color that in real quick just so that I remember those are black. It just helps me with being able to see it better. And now I can't really see the leg sections, so I'm just going to draw like this leg, and knowing this is about where it's at, and it's a bit off, so I'm going to erase it real quick, redraw a line for it, and then draw it in like copying my reference leg. And often you're going to have to look at something else to refer to those tiny details anyway, even when you're out sketching. So a very rough sketch idea of this moth. And then clean it off. You can use your kneaded eraser at this point. Make sure you have a clean spot to kind of get rid of any marks or smudges you don't want. I'm also going to write in, because I have time right now, because I'm doing this from a composite video, White-lined Sphinx Moth. And the scientific name, but it might be better to do these kinds of observations or writing in the name at the end if you're out sketching in the field. And even though this ended up being a little high, this would leave some space for me to make any kind of notes or observations down here, talk about the moth itself or my day or what's going on or how I'm feeling or whatever I might want to add to my nature journal. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here with the drawing, keeping it very basic. And then I'm going to add in, so I want to define this eye just a little bit more. And I'm going to use my reference as far as knowing where some of those marks would be, because I can't really see in the video. and I'm going to leave it just like this, and I'm going to go ahead and start adding the paints. So I'm going to use the paints I mixed for my step-by-step lesson. I saved them, I just revived them with a little bit of water, and I also have my other paints here just in case I need them. If I need a little bit more paint or I need fresh paint for some reason. And I'm going to add all of these colors in a similar way as my step-by-step. So I'm going to start with the Sphinx Moth Tan, the wettest, lightest. I'm going to test it on my paper. It's a little dark, so I'm going to add a little more water to it. Test that on my paper. Looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in a similar way as I did in my step-by-step. So I have my step-by-step lesson here to help me out with this as well, just to make it faster and easier. So I'm just adding this quickly. In very similar fashion and space as my step-by-step lesson. But I am referring to my moth that I'm painting from, the sketching from. But I'm going really quick. This animal is moving, and if I was out sketching, you need to know how, if you're out sketching, to do this with the animals in front of you and moving. And you don't want to worry too much. And if it already flew away, you could just refer to your image to finish it. It does help to have the animal in front of you. Maybe it's flying around and you can move to where it's at, or you can wait for it to come back, or there's a lot of different situations which you might be able to still have it in front of you. But it's just a sketch, it doesn't have to be just right. So if it doesn't look exactly like the reference animal, the animal you're painting from, it's okay. You're just practicing and studying. It's a great thing to do if you're going to be just hanging out outside and relaxing, or if you're going to do a complex painting of this animal down the road. So I've added that Sphinx Moth tan, so I'm going to add the pink. Make sure it's not too dark. Pretty dark. Add a little bit more water. It's not really dark enough. Looks pretty good. It looks fine. Well, still a little dark. Sometimes finding the right color balance with water, pigment to water balance, well, it can be a little tricky. There we go. I think that's That's good enough. And I'm gonna use the same technique I did with my step-by-step. So I'm gonna paint out to about halfway and then clean my brush off and pull that paint to the edge to create a little bit of a gradient, because it does get a little lighter as it goes to the edges of those hind wings. And it started too light, so I picked up a little bit more paint. Just bring that to do the same thing and bring the paint to the edges of those hind wings there. And take a little bit of this pink color and add it real quickly. It's not going to be quite as detailed as the step-by-step. It's a quick representation. So next I'm going to add the Sphinx Moth black. And I'm just going to quickly add that. Again, not worrying too much about being super exact, just kind of getting it in. Quickly onto the page. The more you practice, the better you'll get at all of this too. The more of the step-by-steps you do, the better you'll get. The more sketching you do out in the field, the better you'll get. And you might start being able to observe and see things in a more detailed way as well. It's always great to write down anything you notice that onto your page. The black wasn't quite black enough. I could have added more black to my palette to make it a little bit darker. So I'm just going to go, this dried, so I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more over it. And I'm not going to add it in all the spots because in some areas it's a little transparent on those wings. So I'm going to leave some of that transparency by just filling in some black a little sparingly on those wings. We're just getting this in real quick. I'm not being super exact about it. So next I'm going to add in the Sphinx Moth Burnt Sienna. And I'm going to just add that in basing. It's a little light. I might add a little bit more to my palette. So it looked good on my test paper, but when I put it here, it just wasn't able to pick up quite a dark enough color. Didn't have enough pigment, so I'm going to add some more by just taking it right out of my bottle there and adding it to my palette. Dabbing it on my towel. I want it to be pretty dark but I also want it to be able to move, so it needs to have enough water that it moves smoothly on the paper. That feels better. And it's dark. So I'm doing, because the animal is moving so much, I have to base this off of both my image, my reference image here, and the animal in front of me. Again, not worrying about being too exact, just kind of getting it in. And if I make a mistake and it gets into the white area, that's fine too. It's just a sketch, just a representation, a study. So there is a little bit, again, just kind of basing this more on my reference image. There's a little bit of this burnt sienna color on the bottom there. Then there's quite a bit on the head, which I can see in my video. And I'll add a little bit to each antenna. And there's kind of a striping under the eye on the head. And redefine it based on what your animal's doing or how you see it at this point. And I feel like this is a little darker than my step-by-step right here on the moth I'm painting from right now, so I'm gonna add that in there. And then I'm gonna take that really wet light color and just kind of add that to the upper abdominal area here. It's a little dark, so I dabbed it off on my towel, and then kind of move it like a gradient because I put it on a little darker than I wanted. And then pick up a little bit more. I should have probably tested it out on my test paper first, but I didn't. Then that's what happens. You kind of get the wrong color. And clean off my brush. Actually, I'm gonna add a little bit of this color to the leg. All right, now I'm gonna clean off my brush. And I'm going to add this gray color first, just because that's, not the step I took with the step-by-step, but I'd like to add it right now. And just really roughly adding that in there. And a note you could make about this is, you could say the animal was flapping its wings, so I did not get great detail work on those wings. You could say the animal left and you weren't able to do a lot of little things. So you can write whatever you want on the outside here, giving explanations as to why you did what you did in your sketch, or what the animal was doing, or how long it was there. This moth is drinking from a flower, so maybe you want to talk about that and what kind of flower, what the day was like if you're sketching outside. Next, I'm going to add this deep brown color. I'm going to add a little more water to it. Test it on my paper. It's supposed to be pretty dark. And again, I'm going to do what I did before and add it based on my image and my video, my composite video, the reference animal. Because although this is similar, it's not exactly the same as my original step-by-step image. It gets a little bit lighter, so I dabbed it off on my towel. It's a quick representation again, so I'm just trying to get this in here real quick. Don't get too caught up with the details. It's mostly for observing whatever it is you would like to focus on about this animal or your time outside. And maybe you're just practicing getting paint and painting quickly. That's great too. Clean off my brush. Turn my palette around again. I'm just going to add a little bit more of the Sphinx Moth pink. Brighten up the wing area again. I'm going to do the same thing I did before, kind of paint it in the darker areas. And then clean off my brush, and then take that clean wet brush and kind of move that paint to the edges to create a little bit of a gradient. Because because it is darker in some spots and then it gets a little bit lighter. So I'm doing that on both sides. I'll take some more of that, and the pink on this moth is pretty light, so I'm not gonna, on the abdomen, so I'm not gonna add too much, just a tiny bit. And I think the color of the proboscis is pretty dark, so I'm gonna take, I think, a little bit of this burnt sienna and kind of add it to the proboscis. Maybe that's because of the shadow. From the flower. And I think I like where this paint is at. It still looks really messy. I'll bring it together with the ink lines. Oh, actually, I'm gonna add a little bit of color. I realize I have some color in the eye in my step-by-step image, and I'd like to add a little bit more color to this eye. So I'm gonna add a little color. Now I'll clean off my brush, and you can go back and add more paint or whatever you need to do. So if you go out and you sketch this and you want to add a little bit of paint and ink later, you can do that. Just make sure you let it dry in between layers of paint or ink. And so the last thing I'm going to do is add some ink lines, and I start with the tiny 0.05 micron pen. It's a black, and that's just to start defining where the lines are. And if I accidentally do something I don't like, I can change it and modify it pretty easily since it's so thin. So if this animal had already left, you can base a lot of the drawing on your reference image, kind of like you do with your step-by-step at the end. So really applying a lot of the techniques you're practicing in your step-by-step. When you're sketching in nature, a lot of times you have to kind of do things quickly or make up different things based on what you already know about an animal. And those kinds of things can be noted on the outside. You can say, hey, I based this on this animal left, and I based this on my knowledge or the image. And now I'm going to add the black micron. Be careful because this one does smudge. I'm going to add some thick lines. There's the black 08. And I'm kind of going to add these anywhere I feel like it needs some defining between one side to the other, like here on the body. I think it needs a little defining, separating it from the wing. Or I might add it to parts that I feel are a little bit harder or in shadow. At this feels a good spot to put it. The edge of this wing seems pretty hard in the video. So does this edge. So all the outer edges of the wings in the video look very hard. So I'm going to add this thicker line to kind of mimic that. And I'm going to add it to the bottom of the abdomen here too. Maybe just into here as well. This area looks kind of lighter to me, a little fluffier, so I'm going to leave it. And really just kind of some of the hind wing, but not all of it. And the eye a little bit more. Of course, the antenna. I might just being careful not to smudge any wet ink. And I may add, I'm gonna actually write in the common name right now as well. It's kind of thicken it up a little bit. And lastly, I'm gonna add a little bit more with the 01 micron, kind of thickening up a few of these thinner hairlines. This area here. Maybe this leg line. Maybe the abdominal lines a little bit. I don't want them super thick, but I did want to define them a little bit more. Again, it's a sketch. I might have too many. I haven't really counted these abdominal sections. I might have too many, but that's something that I could write on the sides. That I did this quickly. It wasn't really paying attention to the abdominal sections, or you could look it up later and see if you got the right number of abdominal sections. A good way to learn a little bit more about this animal. And I'm gonna add a few little hairlines here. And then just kind of look at it a little bit if you have the chance. But I like where it's at. I think that looks good. So I'm gonna leave it like this. So we're done. Great job observing your world. Also, make sure to check out naturesketchcrate.com for regular updates through our newsletter and to shop for future crates.